Hello and welcome to the Dapper Gaffer channel. I'm Josiah. We're here at City Stage Studios in Rockford, Illinois, and we're talking about top lights and overhead softboxes and how you can use them in a studio environment. Let's get into it. All right, so when you're talking about a top light, there's two primary ways you can do it. You can either have a bounce that you're bouncing light off of, or you can have a diffusion that you're pushing light down through. Often when we're working with motion pictures, video, you're pushing light down through it, gives you a little bit more options diffusion-wise, and can help keep stands and stuff out of the frame to give you, flexibility to move around a bit more. A couple things you need to think about are the type of fixtures you're going to put above it, the distance between that and your diffusion, and the type of diffusion that you're using. Let me walk you through how we built this setup. We have a 12 by 12 frame here with this completely overkill chain on each corner. You really don't need to use this. This is just something we had around, and it's easily adjustable with these links. But you could hold a truck with that. You could also use rope or sash cord, something like that, safety chains even. This is not a ton of weight when it's just holding a piece of diffusion. That's something that you have to factor in, is how do we mount this thing? We're in a studio today where we have a motorized truss system, so it makes it pretty easy. We can rig everything off the ground. But this is also something that you will often have to do in the air, off of ladders or lifts. Keep that in mind as you're thinking about how you're going to execute the softbox. Another thing that you have to consider is what types of fixtures that you're using. Today we're using Light Panels Geminis. They're soft panel lights. There's a whole bunch of manufacturers who make fixtures like this. You can use a larger, like a matte light, they might be 4x4 or 8x8. That can give you a broader starting point for your fixtures. Or you can even use hard lights. But if you're wanting to have a nice even top diffusion, it's probably going to serve you better to start with soft light, because, for instance, if we put like a cob light or something up here, we might be able to get more output out of it, but we sacrifice softness because we have to have so much distance between the fixture and the material for it to actually soften out. So this is probably my typical starting point, is something like this. You may even consider going tungsten for a rig like this. Why? Well, because tungsten light's beautiful, but cost savings. Once you fill out a piece of diffusion like this or something even bigger, you need quite a few fixtures to make that happen. This is going to cost a fair bit of money to rent, this many fixtures. You can rent a whole bunch of tungsten fixtures to fill out a grid like this in a studio environment, and obviously the thing you have to factor in is the power requirements to do that. For instance, on this rig that we did, we had to bring a 60 or 100 amp Bates feed over just to power the thing, but it gave us the dispersion to fill out the diffusion. Looked great in the end. Now, before we finish getting our diffusion strung up underneath, you want to make sure that your lights are all set as close as humanly possible to where you want them to be for the rest of the day. And that includes if you're doing any sort of control. So if you're DMXing them, or if you're running them to dimmer packs or something like that, now's the time to set that up and tilt and position these as much as possible, because it's very difficult to do that once we build out the rest of our box. Today we have all these DMX together on the same channel. The same channel meaning if you adjust one, they'll all adjust the same way. But you might want to set that up differently to have individual control. But that's a decision that ideally you make now. And we're just, these fixtures are a little bit older now, so they're hardwired DMX together, and then we have one CRMX receiver that's being controlled by a board over there in the wall. And the last thing I want to touch on before we send this thing up in the air is the idea of vertical space that you have to work with. That's a big factor, especially if you're the one responsible for putting the gear package together for the job. You want to check the specs on the space you're going to be in, or go on a location scout to be able to measure yourself. You really start to eat up that vertical space pretty quick when you're putting a rig like this together. Saving that space wherever possible will help set you up for success and give you the ability to have more control if you need it. Could you hand me one of those junior? Okay, so you'll see here we have a a junior grid clamp we're using to hold these junior size fixtures up with. This is another type of a clamp, a junior pipe clamp. Get my nomenclature right here. So these work great. They've been around for a long time, but you'll see in this instance, our junior pin is actually sticking up above the grid. In this instance, we have to drop it down all the way here. You know, that costs us actually a fair bit of space, you know, bringing the light down in this area, and then we have to factor that in our overall height of the build. The other reason that that matters is when we get into deciding how far below the fixtures we want this diffusion to be. Like we talked about, you need it further away if your lights are harder. So it just gives you more flexibility the tighter you can make your rigs. So while all the clamps we're currently using up here, we can actually just tighten with our fingers. You'll often run into equipment like this in stages that's older and requires kind of specialty tools to manipulate it. So this one's got a couple different size square ends on it, which is very common for studio and stage equipment. So good idea to have some sort of stage wrench with you, or at the very least an adjustable crescent wrench. The worst thing is when you're up in the lift rigging your light and you're like, I don't have a way to adjust this thing, when you run into a clamp like that. Or a fixture. Some older fixtures will have these on them as well. So something to keep in mind. This is a Matthews Patriot wrench, which I like. All right, let's finish skinning this thing and we'll send it up in the air. Pro tip for you. Some of these corners, like these ones, don't have a little bar here. If you run one way, one the other way, so one over the top, one underneath, and then come around, it'll still hold that off to the corner. And you don't have to rely on this elastic all day. If you do that, you just shorten the life of the rag. Let's send her up. That's good for now. This is a pretty common sort of system that you'll find in studios with chain hoists, with a motorized grid. This is a Motion Labs control unit, so you can familiarize with that. But just check with the studio, because some of them require a houseman to do that. Here at City Stage, we're not communists, so we let you do it. All right, here we are with our top light up in the air. Now, if you take a look at this, we chose to use full grid cloth, which is a pretty thick diffusion. And if you're wanting a soft, even top light, I would probably go with this, or magic cloth is even a bit softer. But you can see, starting with our semi-soft lights and the distance that we have, we get a pretty even spread of light through that box, even though you can still see a little bit of the individual fixtures above it. But you can also see how we tried to space out the lights fairly evenly within our rig up there, just to further lend to a nice soft source. If we had them all concentric in the middle or too far to the edges, it wouldn't work as evenly as it's working for us right here. Why would you put in the effort to build something like this? I like big, soft sources, and I cannot lie. Well, it really sets you up for the day to go quickly. There's a lot of scenarios you can use a big top light like this. You can see, as we have this up, can we kill that light for a second? This is the only light in the room, and you can see it already looks pretty good, right? We can do a lot in here, products, people, whatever. It already looks stylized, and it's like we thought about it, you know? It's commonly used for product photography, especially if you're like vehicles. That's the first thing I think of if you're lighting a vehicle, is starting with a top light like this. Larger products, it's even helpful just as like a subtle kind of ambient fill to a room. It's very, very natural feeling. If you think of even skylight outdoors, a lot of the light that we see is just light coming from the sky. On the topic of where the light is falling, in this situation, the answer is everywhere, because we have no real control of this top light. We have the light spilling out all across the background. In fact, you can kind of see a little bit of bleed, you can probably see on camera, on that wall directly from the light, because there's nothing that's preventing it from spilling on the wall. What if you need more control? Well, you can skirt it. Let's drop it down and show some options with that. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do this. We're using a bolt of duvetine, or kind of scraps of a bolt of duvetine that are on a roll here, but it works well because they come 57 inches long, gives us this ability to have a good amount of space between here and there, and control it off the bottom as well. I'm mostly concerned, honestly, about the back two sides of this frame that are facing the cyclorama, because that's the direction our picture is facing. I'm less concerned about this side and this side because it's just casting into what is a black studio in the rest of the room. We're not going to have issues with light bouncing back. If we were in a lighter colored environment, we might continue that skirting all the way around. So in our scenario here, we conveniently had something to hang the top of this skirt off of. What if you don't? Well, we thought about that when we were putting this diffusion up. We knew we were going to make it into a softbox. If you're in a studio that has a grid system, a lot of times they're laid out on it's a 4 foot by 4 foot grid. So if you think about it that way and you're able to line up the corners of your diffusion with the edges of that grid, that will cover you for 8 foot, 12 foot, and 20 foot material. Like, as long as you can line it up with the grid, you can already have something above it that you can clip or tie your skirt off to. If you don't, plenty of scenarios where you don't, you need a second frame up here to be able to hang it off of. So you could have literally a second 12 by frame like this to do it with, and just figure out a way to rig that up. You know, in this scenario, maybe we don't want it in this specific position. We want it shifted over some. Well, we could hard mount that top frame to here or something, or tie it on, you know, 2 points on a rope. Bunch of different ways to do it. We're just kind of introducing you to the concept today. There are also products out there, I believe by Honey Crates, that essentially you can use just a top frame, and then on the inside of this fabric, they'll have ties partially down where you can hang a second frame, and you don't have to have anything in between that's holding this frame up. The fabric itself will hold the frame. You can also build a hard frame if you're in a situation where maybe there's a little bit more wind or something like that outside, or drafty barn or something. You could literally build like a speed rail box out of. So at the corners, maybe you have 4 foot pieces of speed rail and you have a fixed box. That gives you something. You're essentially, in my mind, you're building a box. Here we kind of have part of our box up here, part of our box down here, and it gives us the ability to wrap around the box. If you have the vertical height for it, you could even use 8 by rags or 12 by rags for that matter around the edges and just tie them up and tie them together. That's something that gives you the ability to choose what surface this is on the inside. For instance, Ultra Bounce is a great material because it's white on the inside. So that will help your light be a little bit more efficient. Instead of absorbing light on the inside, it will bounce and reflect light, but keep it within the box. All right, to demonstrate how big a difference controlling this top light makes, let's kill our fill light over here. The only light in the room is our top light. This is what it looks like, uncontrolled. And here we are with the skirting up. You can see we left it, bringing that duve a good foot plus down beyond our diffusion frame, and that gives us more control on, or gives us a tighter circle on the ground here. You can kind of see where the light is falling off. If we had the skirt down even further beyond the diffusion, it would make that circle of light smaller. It also obviously makes the walls a lot darker than we had before, and it just gives you the ability to manipulate the look a lot more than if you had no skirting at all. Hopefully that gives you some confidence walking into your next overhead softbox build. That's all we've got for today. We'll see you on the next one.
Good. All right, that's lunch.
Okay guys, you can let me down now. This isn't funny anymore.